Welcome to the Just Third Way podcast, where we ask the question, would you rather own or be owned? Brought to you by the Center for Economic and Social Justice at cesj.org.
Hello, thanks for tuning in to the Just Third Way podcast, and I'm really honored today to have Monica Woodman with us. Hello, Monica.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
Good.
Good to
Thanks
be
for.
here.
Well, I appreciate you joining me and sharing with the listeners a little bit about your story. And it's a pretty interesting one. I don't know how many listeners are familiar with your story, but it all starts with your father, and then you've got you, and you've got your brother Rob, and you've got your sister Jackie, have all been involved with the movement, and just made amazing strides spreading the word and putting projects together, and just hats off to you. And I guess go back for us and tell us something about how it all started because of your dad. I think that's where the story begins, right?
Yep. So growing up as a kid, and I will tell you that Jackie and Rob did go down to the first rally. You know Jackie and Rob. You've met them.
Oh, yeah.
There are eight of us. So.
Oh, wow, big family. Not Catholic or anything, right?
No, not Irish. No. So anyway, so my dad was very much a crusader for broad-based ownership, and spent much of his life writing and getting out there and talking with anyone he could talk to regarding, at that time, the ESOP movement and the employee stock ownership plans. He knew Lou Kelso, and he knew Norm Kurland, and Norm and Lou Kelso put the legislation in place, of course, for the employee stock ownership plans, and they got Russell Long on board, congressman, and they got senator, and put the legislation for ESOPs in place. So my dad was always a big Kelso fan, and very much involved with that legislation in terms of bringing it into the community and looking to develop those concepts within the community.
What was your dad's career like?
He worked in corporate America. He worked at GE. He was an auditor. He worked in the audit department at GE. And then from there, he got into real estate and consulting, and mainly consulting and looking to grow.
Well, that's interesting. I can see how a corporate auditor at a big corporation like that would see the power of long-term ownership.
I really think that he developed that knowledge through going back to like Mortimer Adler. He read all the great books of the Western world and knew who Kelso was. Now, I don't know what period of time in his career he was connected to Kelso, but he always was in the mindset of the dignity of the person and growing, beyond the corporation.
Okay, so his faith was probably just as influential, and philosophy and reading and learning and growing was just as influential as the fact that he started to see how corporations worked and things like that.
Very much so. I would say yes. Yeah.
How about that?
So,
I can see how all those things came together, and he was obviously a remarkable guy, and it's really sad that we lost him. You said in about 2010, right?
Yep. Yes, and that
was the point where you started thinking about kind of taking up where he left off.
Well, a little bit, and it kind of that whole sort of just happened by happenstance, to be honest with you. So growing up, I know that Kelso came into town. Rob picked him up at the airport, my brother Rob, and my dad made arrangements for Tulsa to come to a company in Cleveland called Fastener Tool. And Fastener Tool was a true ESOP, and the leadership of that company really knew what they were doing with ownership and voting rights and that sort of thing with their employees. So
right.
Rob met Kelso, and they brought him in on, I guess it was the 100th birthday of the company, and they brought Kelso in to talk to the employees at the company. So
right.
that was a pretty cool thing. So Rob got familiar with Kelso in that way as well. So anyway, so going back to when my dad did pass away, Rob was also involved in on the Great Lakes. And the Great Lakes, Ogilvy Norton was going to sell off the shipping arm. And so Rob got involved with Norm for the employees to buy the shipping arm of that. And I think you should have Rob on a podcast for that one, because that was a very interesting ride.
I bet.
But anyway, so he got involved with that, and then went down to a rally in Arlington, Virginia, and met Norm. Well, he knew Norm from the boat thing, but when they went down to the rally, Rob experienced the CESJ rally in Washington, D.C., where they were broad-based ownership. So
right.
After my dad passed in 2010, here comes 2011, and Rob was decided to talk with us all, and Jackie and I decided, yeah, let's go meet Norm Curlin. That would be kind of a cool tribute to Dad, and we'll go to this rally and we'll check it out, and all these things we grew up hearing about. And so we went down there, and I'll tell you something, my dad was a one-man crusader, really, in Cleveland. And he was a big voice. I mean, people knew who he was.
Right,
I mean, I got it at work. Oh, your dad's that guy. Yes. And you never knew which side they fell on. They either really liked him or they didn't like him at all. So you were always like a
But
little,
you couldn't debate him because he was right.
No, right. I've had people say that to me as well. He does stand on the right side of things, but he's got some crazy idea. But people don't understand what they don't understand, and that's a huge problem, really. So and even myself, I gotta tell you, even myself, I knew that everything that my dad was saying made total sense to me. Like, if you work a job and if you were part owner in the company, you would get a benefit of your labor, and also your your ownership part of that would be extra money, because you can only work so many hours a day.
Awesome.
So all of that made sense to me, but I never really, you get out in the world and it's like, that's not how it works, and you're working your tail off to get whatever you're making in the pay scale. So when we went down to Arlington and we went to the rally and met Norm and met a whole room full of people like my dad, it was amazing to us. I mean, to Jackie, I was overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed to emotional tears at one point. Sitting
that's
there.
Good.
Well,
yeah, you had recently lost him, so yeah, I would be emotional too.
It was, and reading the core values and the code of ethics, and I could see my dad threaded through every word of that, right? And that was very emotional. For that point of the meeting was very emotional for me. So having experienced the bigger picture of what he was trying to do really came home to me. That made me feel like, this is way bigger than what he was really worked hard to bring to fruition. And it is a hard thing. People just don't. And the thing is, it's as I learned, as I went on beyond that, and I learned, it's very difficult to get people to understand that concept of ownership. If you never owned, you don't really know.
But the thing is, if you look at North Ohio, okay, and you think about all of the ESOP success stories, I mean, there's a super high concentration. Obviously, people were looking for solutions because of
Yeah.
the Rust Belt situation where so many jobs were exported and steel went down to nothing, and manufacturing and, big equipment. And, the same story as Detroit with the cars, it was happening, and everyone knows that. But look at all of the ESOPs concentrated there, and there's no way that your dad didn't have a big part of that. I mean, you mentioned
Oh,
Fastener Tool. They're still
yeah.
going strong. You've got new ESOPs. You got, Evergreen, Ohio Solar, Green City Growers, and a lot of them are different versions of widespread ownership, but they do have components of it and stuff. And as
Yes.
much as you may think it was hard to explain it and that your dad may have been frustrated with not making progress and things, really and truly, it takes generations for these things to happen.
Well,
You
yes,
know?
it does. And Kent State has the ownership group there that, but Dave, what I did learn is, yes, you're absolutely right that did happen in Ohio. There are a lot of ESOPs in Ohio, and I would agree with that. The unfortunate part of the ESOP is that it's really been legalese into a retirement plan.
Yes.
So what it was originally supposed to be developed into has changed in not in a concentrated kind of a wealth way within those companies. The employees don't have voting rights there, and you're right, there's versions of, and there's some sprinkling in there, and it's very difficult to take that and bring it back to originally what they were trying to do with an ESOP,
Right.
and that
Right.
was to broaden the ownership. It's become, even the ESOP within these companies, it's more of, okay, now the company understands the tax benefit and the tax break that they enjoy by having their company be an ESOP,
Right.
and it doesn't really benefit the worker as it once was envisioned to do. So,
I'm a small business owner also, and I look at things like, okay, I want to take my hard-earned money and build something, and I would like to cut the employees in, but I don't want it to ever be mob rules where they could totally change something than what the original focus of the business was. So I understand how we get in these situations, and I think that is the reason why we need pure credit, a philosophy that changes from where we are today in terms of, if you have a feasible project, and you have experienced people coming together and wanting to do it, or an existing business that wants to sell, it should be pure credit to finance for the 100% purchased by the employees. And then if they follow justice-based management, which is what CESJ advocates, and then that's what we're all
right,
striving toward in this organization. So you're
that's
right.
right.
You're
And if
right.
you
It's a
if
dilemma,
you have,
and
it is, and if you have the governance board in place and the education and the justice-based management would provide that education and provide that culture within that company so that it doesn't get lopsided.
right.
So it's difficult, and
Yes.
okay. So getting back to like even going and starting a model and starting from that basis or that framework, that is difficult as well.
Right.
Working on this project I worked on in Cleveland, and I spent a lot of time, and I'll tell you, it takes a lot of time and effort to put into developing and bringing the right people together and then keeping that all in place and moving. So it's very much a labor of love, and if you don't have the sustainability or the funding to stay in the game with that, it's very difficult to bring it to fruition.
Right. You were
However, so
fighting an
when
uphill battle. And that was
A little bit.
Hopalong, right?
Yes, a little bit. But Dave, I'll tell you, I don't regret 1 second of it. I just learned a ton. So
Right.
when we were doing that, so I had a group of guys that had experience. They had a green SIPS building model. They had a SIPS model, which is green growth, and it was a building
Yeah,
technology.
it was like a building panel, like for building low cost housing, where they were
That's
making
right.
and they are successfully doing that.
Well, it wasn't necessarily low cost housing, but it was a panel that code was going toward the code of the cities were going towards. It wasn't the cheapest thing in on the block, but it was absolutely feasible. And
Right.
so we had these, and they had done they used the technology. They had done projects with it. They were it wasn't like they came up with this panel and they were trying to get it off the ground. They had done projects with it. It was out there. So we had the startup group, and then we had a bank that was willing to, as part of the model, we wanted to show pure credit or capital credit. So the bank was going to put a CD in place where if we could get the funding, and this is what the trick was. This was the difficulty and
Right.
why it didn't go forward. So
Well,
if
we're
we could have
trying
got
to demonstrate something that can work in an entire environment of the old system. So it's, very,
That's
very
right.
hard
That's
until,
right. So you
yeah,
have to have the components of the old. I mean, you have to have some of the old system on board to move this
right,
forward. But the bank was there. The struggle was getting that CD funded. So once the CD was funded, and we were looking at like a couple $100,000. It wasn't a huge amount of money. So
right,
if we could have got the CD funded, then the folks that funded the CD would enjoy some interest on their money, and I think it was like 8%, but they would have no rights or ownership to the project, the company within the model, because the
right,
company within the model would then utilize that funding, that startup money, to take off. And then the company that was going to be the model company, 100% leveraged ESOP, it would have a board of governance and it would operate under the justice-based management system. And we would have had something to really put out there and show. And I
right,
do believe that by having a model, you can then have an educational vehicle to build from. So that was
right,
my thrust into looking to do something like that. And even though it didn't get funded and it didn't come to fruition, I learned and I more understand the importance of getting a model put together than ever.
right,
So I haven't given up on developing a model in some way, and however, difficult in terms of time and availability to put towards that big of a venture right
right,
now. However, having said that, so I've been constantly, it's always in the back of my mind, and I've always will direct anyone I'm talking to talk with Norm and CESJ and get on board or go into the website to learn and understand and that sort of thing, so that if you hit the right person, you hit the right person, the person that could do that and understands it and will be able to be a leader in that regard. And there's somebody out there. There are people out there that just don't know what they don't know, and there are people that would have the wherewithal to bring that to fruition.
right,
And I hope that in my heart, I hope that comes about sooner as opposed to later. So the other thinking on that was, and in staying plugged into the conference calls at CSJ and that sort of thing, and learning that in Michigan, and you talked about the Rust Belt. So in Michigan, how devastated the Detroit area was through the housing crisis, and not just the Rust Belt, by the way. The housing crisis was a huge hit to both Cleveland and Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
So it was brutal. So Detroit has had real problems with that, and I know that Norm is connected with some city councilmen and folks within the government that are looking to, what are we going to do? Well,
right.
In East St. Louis, there was a model that they were developing. And Wivetta Young was a congressperson, and she got 114 to none favorable vote on moving forward with this project in East St. Louis. So the components were coming together. We had good leadership out there, and then she passed away. And when she passed away, she was like the glue. The wheels kind of started falling off. So you have that. So you're right. I mean, it takes generations to do this kind of stuff.
Right.
It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it's a lot of bringing people together and education and the whole 9 yards, right? So
until we have some kind of superstar leader that, really gets attention or something, and that's all we can do is a little at a time.
That's right. And so looking at Norm talking about the Detroit scenario and these the city council people, I started thinking, you know what? City council people get paid. and if they're run into this thing and they can either run on a platform for this or they can glob onto it and see the benefits that it could do for their city, then I might be on something. And if I can get that leadership on board, because this is not an ego thing for me. It's like if I can get that leadership, I don't care who makes the money and makes it happen. Just make it happen. So I am now going to city council meetings in East Cleveland because East Cleveland is the same demographic as East St. Louis. While I'm not a scholar and I don't know all the integral pieces, parts of how this is going to practically roll out and work, I do know in the bigger picture what that means for a community and what that means for people in general, every citizen being owners. I do understand that. And I do understand what that would mean to every single person's life. It would enrich them hugely. So because of that, that's where you find my passion, David. And you were saying how you asked me questions and you weren't sure why I didn't know the answer to that question that I was asking you. I'm learning just like everybody else. But the thing is, I know for sure that this is a way better scenario for people than being a wage slave. Or just going out there and only getting a paycheck. Because if you can buy in to the system as an owner, your life is going to be more richer, and you're going to have more time and more. Look, if I could have my 1.5-year-old granddaughter and I can be in the moment and present, not be worrying about how the bills and this and that, wouldn't that be a better life?
Yes.
Just that in itself, or a gardener that could just go out and garden and not worry about, how they're making their money. I mean, it's capital ownership is just where it's at. So
it really is.
If I can get ingratiated into the city council at the East Cleveland and find one leader in there that catches this and understands that this might be the best way out and the best model for them to develop their city that's crumbled to a fairly well, then great, let's do it. So that's what I'm working on, trying to, bring out. Because the other part of that is that way you have city leaders and they're connected to county leaders and state leaders. And if they can work that and it's their job to make things like that happen. It's their job to make it better for people, right?
Right. That's right.
So they
That's
get
right.
paid to do that, and we pay them to do that. So I would be
Exactly.
thrilled.
We elected them and put them there so they would get a salary, and yeah.
That's exactly right. So it's almost like you can either rally up the troops in the community to get after them and teach them, but again, the education, it's tough, man. It's tough to really educate people on what this means. It's like you have the haves and the have-nots, and you both have the same system, and
Right.
you have the welfare
And
system.
everyone at every different level is in need of more education on this subject. And I was thinking you were just mentioning that the housing crisis was just as big of an issue, and I agree. But also, people may not know, you're actually a real estate agent, is that right?
I am. Yep.
So that
jumped
may
in,
be...
Dave. I jumped in 2006, right when it hit, and I was like going, I never got into real estate for this. Like bank-owned properties and foreclosures, and I got my sea legs working with investors buying bank-owned properties, and I never really wanted to do that. It was a devastation to Cleveland, and I'll tell you though, we're on the rebound. Let's have some good news here. We're on the rebound because in my city alone, in Lakewood, Ohio, there were, at that time, I think there were like 400 houses on the market at that time, 400 single-family homes. Today, there's probably 38.
Yeah, it's really changed.
So it's a huge difference. So even when I got in Garfield Heights, I listed a house on a street in Garfield Heights, and there was one other house that was listed on that street. In 2 weeks later, there were 11 houses listed. So guess what happened to those home values? They plummeted. There was so much inventory that buyers wanted to see 100 houses because they were afraid to buy one because there was so much out there. It's like looking at, going and looking for the right pair of shoes. You got so many to choose from. So it was devastating.
Well, people see, really... on TV, you see these, like, I don't know, I saw one of these crime shows or something where they had tracked down some criminals to some place they were hanging out, and it was a whole street of just empty, it looked like a war zone, just these bombed out looking houses. And until you go there, people probably don't realize you have whole sections of Cleveland and Detroit and some of these other cities. It's hideous.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that's coming back. And maybe we missed a little bit of a window of opportunity because I think we had, the idea of buying like a city block and then setting it up so that the local people
and
owners.
I did look into doing that, Dave. Like you could buy the city block and have people own them, and that. But here's the thing. But it was difficult because it wasn't
your whole area. It's like the culture of the drugs and the crime and the guns and just nobody wants to go there. They're all getting out.
Mhm. It was more that it wasn't enough houses in a concentrated area to actually pull that off. Now there was a window of opportunity, and I was talking with coincidentally enough, they were acronymed ESOP 2, and it was Empowering and Strengthening Ohio's People. And that was a housing crisis organization, nonprofit that came together, and I was talking with them as well. The thing with that was we could not pull together enough houses in a concentrated area in which to do what you're speaking of. They were too spread apart to do it.
Well, we didn't have enough leadership in the local governments because, a government can come in and say these areas are condemned and eminent domain and set up a citizens-owned corporation.
Yes,
it takes leadership.
It truly does, and it takes leadership that's in it to win it, and they have the wherewithal, for sure. And I did talk with organizations and brought Norm in and tried to to do something like that. But you're right. We didn't get to the leadership, the actual leadership that could have ability to exercise eminent domain and that kind of thing. The governor now of Ohio is Kasich.
Kasich,
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, ran for governor, and in the primary, and I believe Richard Cordray won the primary. Richard Cordray was connected to this ESOP, this Empowering and Strengthening Ohio People. He was a big proponent of that organization, and he actually, that organization got Obama to tour Cleveland, and that organization won Cleveland, I think it was $4.5 million to put towards the housing crisis in Ohio.
Wow.
So he was involved with that scene, and he won the primary. So I guess he's the fellow on the ticket in the election for governor of Ohio, and he's running against, I want to say, Steve DeWine. So Cordray was connected with the organization with the same acronym, ESOP, and that acronym stood for Empowering and Strengthening Ohio's People. And that organization was working. Yes, that organization was working to alleviate the housing crisis.
And that's a source of confusion. They use that same acronym.
Oh yeah, right. It was a little bit, but Cordray was also he was in the federal government as well. He was it's gonna kill me. He was the consumer watchdog guy in the federal government, the Consumer Protection Agency.
Okay.
Under Obama's administration, so he worked with, I guess he worked with making sure banks weren't overstepping or overreaching and that sort of thing. And I think they pretty much, I think this current administration has pulled a lot of his work back, I believe.
Well, my big complaint with the Trump administration, I mean, they're in favor of business and everything, but they're not focusing enough on the purpose of government coming to busting up monopolies and things like that. I mean, we've got some massive tech monopolies in this country that are super, super powerful. And I mean, I don't see how that's any different than, the huge railroads and oil companies that Teddy Roosevelt and so many other trust busters forced to break up. And I mean, I know that some of those things, they don't do them right. They don't break them up right or whatever, but there needs to be a lot more attention on that. And of course, widespread ownership would be a big part of it. But as you know, I'm more of a conservative. And
right, I do know that. And my dad was totally against monopolies, and that was a big thing that he railed against, worked.
I just don't understand where the attention to that subject is these days,
I don't know.
I mean, that's supposed to be a founding principle.
It's concentration,
Yeah.
We're
debating the wrong things.
It's kind of, to me, it's like it's the mindset of abundance or the mindset of scarcity. And that mindset of scarcity can go all the way to the top. And when you have a mindset of scarcity, you want to have all of it, because then you're not going to lose. You're always in the mode of, if I have more, I won't have less, right?
Right.
And the mindset of abundance, on the other hand, is the mindset of you're operating not in the scarcity mode, and there will be enough for all, because we'll make sure there's enough for all, and that can get done. I mean, I'm not talking about utopia here. I'm just talking about fairness.
Right. Well, we've had this, I guess, history of boom and bust.
Or justice, I should say.
Right. But, yeah, the boom and bust, historically has caused people's brains to form in such a way that they're thinking, okay, I'm doing good right now, so I'm going to hoard, instead of how can I change the system so that we don't have a boom and bust and everyone can
Right.
enjoy success, and we don't have to hoard, So it's
That's
just
right.
required
No,
a change in
that's
philosophy.
right.
One thing that is remarkable about you is the way that you have brought in so many people. You basically have a chapter. I know you probably don't meet all the time up there, but you had the first chapter of CESJ away from Washington, D.C., so hats off to you for that. And, we got some other people in like Louisville that are doing some stuff, but you and the people around you, and of course your family, have really caused Cleveland to be a center of activity for CESJ and the Just Third Way. So let me ask you, how do you get the conversation started with people? Because so many of us are out here, we want to be more like you. It's not some big technical thing. I mean, but there must be some trick.
Well, Dave. Okay, so
I think it's just enthusiasm.
That's a good question, and I think it's basically I'm always kind of thinking about it. So if I do start talking to somebody about it, and it's not somebody that's going to give all this doom and gloom pushback stuff,
right?
I'll roll with it. Or the other thing is, and I'll tell you, this is really how I start with. Let's talk about the Hopland thing and how I started talking with people about that. So First of all, we were looking at a completely different industry, a different model company, and that company lost their technology. There were issues with that, so I knew it was this green technology, and I was at my church. There's a pastor there who is very much a justice-based kind of guy, and I went to him and started talking with him about this model and what we were looking to do, and he was a little bit interested in that. So I connected him with Norm because, again, big picture, I understand that concept. Practical and roll it out, talk to Norm.
Right, and that's fine. Everybody has their role. You don't have to be an absolute expert on all the details.
That's right. There are people there for that in place that are way smarter than me, and God bless them. So when I went to him with that, he suggested a couple people that might be interested. One of them was Brian Corbin, who was with the Catholic Diocese. And then there was Father Bob at St. Coleman's, and then there was a couple of other fellows that he had mentioned. I just called them up and told them that we're looking to put together this group of people to talk about this idea, and would love your input and would love your participation. And that's what I did. I mean, I didn't have a big story about how it was going to work and all this stuff. And then I was like extremely diligent, and I mean for like 3 months. Okay, it wasn't like I just called them up and they all came. I was extremely diligent in putting the date together. These were busy people that had packed schedules. So it took 3 months for me to get them in the room together. Norm came into town. So it was a lot of it. I'm in sales. I have a sales background. So I know that if you don't follow up, you're not going anywhere with anything. So it was a lot of follow-up and a lot of calls and at one point, the pastor of my church said to me, "You're just like a little bulldog." And I didn't know quite how to take that, because it's like, I don't picture myself that way, but I guess in retrospect, I guess I kind of was.
But that's okay. I mean, it's like we say, persistence, persistence, persistence.
That's right. So, and I'll tell you, I never got asked to bring the gifts up in church, but after that meeting, the pastor came up to me in church and said, "That was the most inspirational get-together I have ever been involved with." And he asked me to bring the gifts up, and I said, "Oh, I'd love to."
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah,
and obviously he gave you some recognition because he realized that people know there's things wrong and that
Yeah.
something different needs to be at least tried.
Yes. And he respected Norm huge. When we were on the phone conference call with Norm, he mouthed to me, "This guy is really smart." And Father Bob's an attorney. He's a lawyer in the canons. He's a smart guy. He's really a very smart guy.
Wow.
And even with his knowledge and his sense of justice, I really wish he would have done a little bit more to propel what we were trying to do. But again, he's running a parish and he's doing what he's doing, and he's done tremendous work, especially like in the refugee community and that sort of thing. So we all have the time that we have.
Right. Well, hats off to you and starting to put these things together and at least trying. And one of these times you're going to hit it out of the park, I'm sure. And like I was kind of mentioning to you, even though there's not really a pure 100% just third way model, there's so many that are close. And I think anyone would have to acknowledge that your dad and you and your family have helped to lay the groundwork for that. So tell us how some of those that are pretty close to being what we want, like Evergreen and Ohio Solar and Green City Growers, how are they making it? Because they just got started a few years ago, most of them, right?
They did. And Dave, I'll be honest with you, I haven't really tracked their growth in Cleveland. What I will tell you is I did get in touch with the leadership of that model that was working out of the University of Maryland. So it was Gar Alphavitz and Ted Howard. And Ted Howard at the time was working out of the Cleveland Foundation. And I'm not sure that he was worked for them, but he did have an office there, and he was working with Gar out of the University of Maryland on these co-ops, and probably other things too. I don't know his whole background in Cleveland.
Well, I think Evergreen is known worldwide as being successful. It's basically a laundry service, isn't it?
It's a laundry service, and they also, under that umbrella, they have Green Growers, which they service the restaurant industry and maybe a little bit beyond by now. They grow lettuce, and I think it is in an aquaponics.
Right.
And so those two, and that model came from Mondragon in Spain. So that was a model that was put together in Spain, and I guess Gar picked up on that, or I'm not sure of all these details. Please don't, hold my feet to the fire. But so they developed that. They had the university behind them, helping them with developing that. And it's cash savings, but the employees do have to put 50 cents an hour. They get paid, and then 50 cents of their hourly pay goes towards shares in the company. So they do within an ESOP, as you know, you don't put your own money up. You through future earnings pay the loan back, and you're an owner.
Right. I kind of looked into it some, and I think the big difference is, with our model, each employee starts with one voting share, and you basically keep it that way, but that's equal to any other employee, including the CEO. Of course, the people who are there longer accumulate more wealth over time because of, earning every year, but they don't have like a double advantage there.
Yeah.
So it's more more equal.
And that is absolutely the nuts and bolts that I would always have Norm or Mike speak to, as how that is developed and how that works, how the ESOP actually works as a 100% leveraged operation.
And I think that you guys have some credit unions there that are starting to be interested in these kind of things. If I remember.
I think they're
So
it was either that or it was a bank that was a smaller bank that had they weren't like a national bank. They were a small,
like a mutual bank kind of thing.
Ohio bank or something like that. Yes, that
right.
was.
Well, I tell you, you have done a good job in bringing people together and at least having an awareness of these things, and even bringing people to
Yes.
our phone calls and our rallies and things like that. So
Yes.
if someone wanted to get in touch with you, if they, wanted to work with you on forming an organization, whether it's a business like a 100% employee-owned ESOP or a Citizens Land Bank type thing, Facebook, to contact CESJ through the
That's
website,
right.
and mention that they are in the Ohio area, and they can get in touch
And
with you through CESJ.
they can give them my phone number. I have no problem with that.
Right, no problem. And if anyone's wanting to sell a house, they can call you, right?
Oh, absolutely, honey. I will help them and do a good job for them.
I hear that. Well,
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Just that if anyone that's been listening has any kind of curiosity about what we've been discussing, and instead of just making an hourly wage or even a salary, there is a way that you can accommodate and have additional revenue stream. So if you're curious about that, I would very much direct you to www.cesj.org. You'll find Norm's phone number on there and all the information you could ever want to understand and learn.
Right. And I would say also that not just in structuring things, but an overall philosophy of politics and uniting people. I mean, here we are. From a conservative, I guess you'd say Republican, but also kind of libertarian background. And you are, a progressive, Democrat type voting person. And here we are coming together. If we could get some candidates that would listen to what we're saying, we would both vote for them. What a coalition that could be,
I agree wholeheartedly, Dave. This is really not a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, separated thing. This is absolutely something that every person would benefit from, and they benefit in a huge way. And if you're looking to understand that or read more about that or develop in that way, yeah, you really need to go to the website and
we also are forming a political party, Unite America Party. You can go to uniteamericaparty.org, and hopefully we can get some momentum there, because, I mean, there really is no other way to bring people together and say, yes, government is too big, but there's a problem. There needs to be a different way of helping these large classes of people who are struggling, and there's only one way to do it without taking from everyone who already has it, and that is create money, you loan it into existence from, a credit from the Federal Reserve. They're doing it right now anyway. It's so crazy. They're creating money for so many things. We just have to limit that to productive growth and have it flow through the people's retirement account, basically. So that's
and the other thing to that is if people out there listening are frustrated and can't make it their full-time job to come up with a completely different system, and they are frustrated with the system that's so big and so complicated, there are people that have literally been looking at those the systems for 50 years or more that have come up with a solution to much of what you are probably frustrated with and you are probably struggling with. And if you can find the information to look at and see this really could be a better way, and you don't have to do anything to develop it. It's already there for
Exactly.
your learning and understanding. And if you learn about it and you understand it, I think you would come on board and decide that the Unite America Party might be the way to go to get the changes that so many people are frustrated with.
That's right. Yep, that's a good word. And the only other thing I meant to say is people could look to you as an example. Your enthusiasm and your persistence is more important than being knowledgeable about every little detail, because even though you actually know a lot more than you say you do, sometimes you act like you don't, but people enjoy talking to someone who has that attitude, instead of someone who's a know-it-all and knows everything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I'm not a know-it-all, that's for sure. And I'm blessed though, Dave, and I'm blessed in this way. I'm blessed in knowing that if I can't get an answer for someone, I know where to go get it.
That's right.
And that's
right.
what I have. And I'm not the person that I'm ever going to say I am the end be all, because I'm not. And it takes many, many people and ideas and thoughts and debate and discussion to come up with these kinds of things. It's not one person, and it never will be.
Well, I tell you, I wish I had been around to know your father, but I think that knowing you and Rob and some of your family members, I can see exactly where he was coming from, and he would be proud of you. He really would. So,
yeah.
Thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I'm thrilled that you even asked me. But I would reach out to Rob and Jack because I think they'd be awesome podcast participants.
I will do that. Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Well, you have a great day.
Dave.
Okay. Thank you, Monica.
You too.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.